Alright, so now we're ready to get the C3 installed, and the method that we're going to show you here is the Undersink method. There's also a couple other methods of installation we're going to show you before this video is over, but the most popular method is to put the C3 under the sink, connect it directly to your cold line, so anytime that you turn on your faucet for your cold water, you're going to be getting that great C3 triple filtered water. You don't see any hoses, you don't have to drill any additional faucets. This is the absolute best and recommended way to install it. And for those of you who live in apartments or you live in homes that you plan on moving out and you don't want to do any elaborate installations, this is absolutely the best way to get this installed. So everyone has under their sink a shut-off valve for the cold water. Now in most cases the cold water is going to be on the right hand side. But the way that you verify it is you shut off the supply to the cold water, turn it all the way closed, and then go up to the sink and open the cold water. If water's still coming out, that means this was not the cold water. Or if you have cold water, or if you have hot water coming out, then you didn't shut off the cold water. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, if you have hot water coming out on the cold end, you didn't shut off the right end. So sometimes the construction people make a mistake and they put the cold on the left side. You might also find a multitude of these shut-off valves in newer homes where they have a shut-off valve for the dishwasher, they have one for an Insta-Hot, they have one for cold water, and they have one for your refrigerator supply. It doesn't matter which cold water valve, so you don't have to worry if you find two cold water shutoffs. It's okay, you could connect to either one of those. So what you want to do is shut this completely off. I'll mention one more thing at this point. Some of you have older homes, and what's going to happen is you're going to look under here, and this is going to be corroded with a green, cakey, powdery material. That's called calcium and scale buildup. That valve might be so old, you're not going to be able to completely shut it off. And this is the point where I'm going to highly recommend you replace this valve, put a new one in there. You need it anyway. It has nothing to do with this install, because in an emergency, you have to be able to shut your water off. So if you go to shut this off, and you take this connector off like I'm about to show you, and water's still dripping, it's time to replace the shut-off valve. So what you want to do is you want to shut this all the way off, and then you want to go up and open the faucet on the cold end and make sure nothing's coming out. That means you have shut it off. And we're going to take our pliers or our adjustable wrench. Now what you see here is a more modern hose. These are called steel braided hoses. Some of you are going to have plastic tubing, some of you are going to have solid metal tubing. But this is going to be the most common of what you're going to see for the homes that are built or any plumbing that's been done in the last 10 years. You're going to see it like this. And all you have to do is put your wrench on this nut and give it a few twists and remove it. Now, this shutoff valve, there's only two standard sizes in the United States. You have 1/2 inch and you have 3/8. That's why there's 4 pieces in here. So we're going to take the shutoff valve and put this to the side because we're not going to use this right now. And what you'll see here is you'll see we have 4 pieces. We have a 1/2 inch setup. These are both for 1/2 inch threads on the shutoff valve. And then you have one for the smaller threads, 3/8 inch. We happen to have 1/2 inch today, so the 3/8 are not going to be used. These are extra parts that you're going to have, and we'll set them to the side. Here we're going to use the 1/2 inch pieces, and I'm going to show you how very easy these are to install. So this piece here is going to go right on to your shutoff valve. And the neat thing about these is these have a gasket built in on the inside, so you don't need a wrench. Tighten them down, snug, and then go another good 1/2 turn till you feel it nice and tight by your hand. You don't need a wrench, and you don't need to over tighten it. Do not over tighten it, you might possibly break it. So the tube that's hanging, that's feeding your faucet up there, is where the other piece is going to go into. And you'll simply screw this in. Again, hand tight. And if anything, you can take a wrench and give it a half a turn and get it nice and snug. So when you're done, you're going to have something that's looking like this. Now, for any chance you have a solid metal tube going up there and you've not done plumbing, you've not cut metal tubing before, this is the point where I would suggest that you bring in a handyman. Not a plumber, but open your yellow pages and call a handyman, because they can get this done in 10 or 15 minutes. They might charge you $30. It's worth it to have somebody with the proper tools and the proper knowledge to come in at that point. But if the tube going up from here is the flexible type, then you can do this yourself. All right, so from here, next thing is we're going to take the C3 and set it under the sink. And just so you know, it's hard to read on the plastic, but the inlet starts on the right hand side. The clear filter is where the in water goes, and on the left hand side is where the outlet water goes. And this is how simple this is. You're going to take your larger tubing, which is the 3/8, and it'll have a zip tie on it. I simply take my pliers and take that zip tie and just twist it, and it comes right off. And by the way, don't throw these down your sink like I'm doing. This is not a working sink, so it's not going to clog things up. So we have our 3/8 inch tubing. And by the way, it's literally impossible for us to cover all the dozens of different types of installations, different types of sinks. Some of you might need a longer run of this 3/8 tube than we've supplied. If that's the case, give us a call. We're happy to mail you more at no charge. Or this is available at every hardware store. It's called 3/8 inch hard plastic tubing for water supplies. 3/8 inch hard polypropylene plastic tubing for water supplies. Home Depot, Lowe's, almost every hardware store out there has this stuff, and it's very inexpensive. So if you don't feel like waiting for us to mail you some, it's very easy to go out in your local area and buy this. What I'll generally do with this is I'll find the halfway point, and this is where I'm going to take my razor blade and just cut through it. Now, the key thing when you cut the tubing is you want to make sure that you haven't flattened the tubing out. I hope the cameraman can get this and see that. See how the tubing is not round anymore? It's become flat. We don't want that because it'll cause a leak when we connect it in the tubing. So make sure that you've reshaped it with your fingers. It's also a good idea, if you see any uneven edges or burrs, just to take your razor blade and put the tip in there and twist it around a little bit so you have a nice clean edge. And I'm going to put the C3 up here so we can all see exactly what I'm doing. And I'm going to take one end of this and insert it into the connector here. And the connector should be loose. If it's tight, loosen it up so the plastic tubing can go all the way down into the fitting. What we don't want is just to have a little tiny bit of the tubing in the fitting and you tighten it down, it will not hold, it's going to blow out of there. It's very important that when you push this tubing in, you push it all the way down and you feel it bottom out and stop. At that point, go ahead with your fingers and snug this nut up. And then we'll do the same exact thing on the other side. And you get it nice and snug with your fingers. Once you've got it snug with your fingers, go ahead and grab your adjustable pliers and give it a few more turns. You definitely want to get this nice and tight. A good test to see if it's good is give it a good hard tug. And if it doesn't pull out, you've done your job. And as with any plumbing installation, once you hook this up and you've turned the water on, if you see any little drips coming out, you can take your pliers and turn it another turn or two. Even with the water pressure in the unit, you should see that drip stop right on the spot. Don't be afraid to tighten it up a little bit, even after the water's been turned back on. All right. And that's it. So now we're ready to hook this up to the water and get started. So we'll put it under the sink, and you could basically put this wherever you want. You could position it everywhere, anywhere you want under the sink. If you decide to hang it, which personally I think it's a waste of time to try and put these brackets, these metal brackets on the system and hang it. However, there is a nice instruction sheet in here with a schematic showing you exactly how to do it. And basically the brackets bolt to the bottom of the unit, and then you can hang the unit upside down on the back of the cabinet. Again, if that's what you want to do for looks or to keep it neat, that's why we put the bracket in there. But in my opinion, it's not necessary. All right, so we'll take our inlet and we'll connect it to the quick connect on the shutoff valve by pushing it in. Now I'm going to give you a separate demonstration up top here of how quick connects work. And what I'll do for demonstration's sake is I'll just cut a little bit of our 3/8 tubing here. Quick connect fittings are some of the best advanced materials in plumbing today. This is how you make the connection. You simply push the tubing in until it can't push anymore and you're done. You will not be able to pull it out. This is a solid plumbing connection. I mean, the licensed plumbers might be out of business in the future because of this. But basically, these are quick connects. Now, if you ever need to remove this, what you need to do is you need to shut the water pressure off. Open the faucet so the pressure in the lines bleeds out. And you'll notice on here, cameraman, let's get a zoom in on this collar. You'll see that there's a collar here that is separate from the body of the piece. And this is with all quick connect connectors. What you simply do is take your fingernail, push that collar in, and while holding it in, you can pull the piece out. You might have to use 2 fingers to hold it in to pull the piece out. But essentially, unless you're holding that collar down, you will not be able to pull this piece out. The other thing is, for these to seal properly, it's very important that this cut is square and there's no burrs. So if you've cut it like this, I can guarantee you this thing is going to leak and it's going to be dripping all over the place. The cut has to be perfectly square, and if it's not, recut it again. Make sure you ream it out a little bit, whether you're using the scissors or the razor blade, and put it back in, and that's it. Quick connect fittings are that simple. So now we have our water supply going from our shutoff valve into the C3 filter, and then the line that's coming out will get pushed into this fitting. And now you can see that we have our water, instead of going straight up to your faucet, it's coming into the C3 and it's going right back up to your main faucet line. Now, if your faucet had threads that were 3/8, the only difference is you would use this piece with the brass nut, would go here on the shutoff valve, and then this piece with the larger brass fitting, which with the male threads would go up into your line, and then your 3/8 tube presses right in there. So this is the only difference if it had this size. We also include this, this shutoff valve, which can be inserted right here in this line. So you can just make a cut here and push, and this is also quick connect, and you could push it here. This also serves 2 purposes. If you want a slower water flow coming through the C3, or you're using this with an ionizer and you want to be able to dial down the water flow, maybe you have one of the older model ionizers that don't have a flow control like our Max does, this comes in really handy because you can use this to slow down the water flow for making stronger waters like a super strong acid water. Otherwise, you might not need this, and I'm not including this in the install because if there's ever an emergency or there's a leak or anything like that, you just come underneath and shut that valve off, and that's how you protect yourself. Speaking of leaks, we also have a product available, and it's on our website. It's called the Leak Detector System. It costs right in the, I'm not sure the exact cost, it's between $45 and $60. It's a good investment because it plumbs in with Quick Connect right into the main line, and it has a sensor that sits on the bottom of your cabinet, and if there's ever a water leak under your sink, it shuts the water supply off. So think about it, an extra $60 for that kind of security. The other thing I want to mention is, as with any new plumbing installations of any types of products, please check under your sink constantly for the first 24 hours after you've installed this. When I say constantly, every hour or so, go and look under the sink. I like to put a few paper towels, so if there's a drop of water or anything, that I can see it show up on the paper towel easier than you'd see a drop or two of water in the cabinet. 99% of water leaks happen within the first 24 hours of a new product. It is very, very rare to see our product have a leak. But if anybody tells you their product never leaks, they're a liar. All plumbing products are susceptible to leaks, and it can happen from time to time. So we want to take our best care to install it properly, and we want to keep a good eye on it the first 24 hours to make sure that no leaks develop. After the 24 hours, it's very rare that you're going to see a leak show up. So now that you have this installed, you're going to notice that you have some directions in here, and the main one has a red warning sign on here. Basically, the filters need to be flushed out. We do not want you drinking this water until the filters have been flushed out. Now, what you want to do is you want to go back up and close your cold faucet, just shut it off, and go under here and open the faucet. What that's going to do is it's going to send water pressure into the system. If there's any immediate leaks, this is the time where you're going to see them. If you see water dripping from here, or you see water dripping from here or anywhere, all you have to do is take out your pliers and go a quarter turn at a time. Don't start cranking it and over tighten and possibly break things. Just give it a quarter turn, take a paper towel, dab off the leak, check it again, make sure it's not dripping. The same if it's here or if it's here on these compression nuts. If it's on a Quick Connect fitting, then I suggest you take out the hose from the Quick Connect, recut it, re-clean the ends with either the tip of the razor blade or the scissor, and then reinsert it. It's very, very rare that Quick Connect fittings have a leak. Once you've done that and you see that you're not leaking, now you can open up the faucet, and as the directions show, run cold water through the filter for 5 minutes, shut the water off, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then open the faucet up and let it run for 10 more minutes. Then the filter is completely flushed out, any dust or residues have been removed from there, and now you're ready to start drinking your water. And the neat thing is, not only do you have safe and good tasting filtered water for drinking, but unlike when you have bottled water in the house, now you actually have the same safe water for cooking, for cleaning. I mean, who uses bottles of water to fill up a huge pot to cook pasta and rice? So this presents a huge, huge advantage. The other thing is, I hope everyone realizes, everyone that has this filter, I hope you realize that this filter is cutting most of your water bills by 60 to 70% per year. Meaning most of us are spending $500 to $600 a year on bottled water. Even if we get the cheap stuff from the big box stores, this is running you $200 and $125 a year at the time we're filming this video to replace the filters. So it's a no-brainer. You're getting better than bottled water quality, endless supply, on demand, for literally a third of the cost. So by the time you've flushed it out, you're ready to drink, and you should notice that the water tastes fantastic. And that is the end of our Undersink C3 install.